Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today I have the pleasure of Chris Cook on the show. Good morning to you, Chris.
Morning, Julian. You all right?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm just going to let the audience know a little bit more about you. You're a former competitive swimmer and you swam for Great Britain in the Olympics, World Championships, European Championships, and have competed for England for the Commonwealth Games as well. And you specialise in breaststroke, and you took gold in 50 metres and 100 metre finals representing England at the 2006 Commonwealth Games in Melbourne. And you've also competed at two Olympics, 2004 and 2008. And you're now a motivational speaker and also a business coach even. And today we're going to be exploring how to harness the sort of true power of the right mindset, but also by keeping it really simple. And maybe some analogies that come out of swimming. I'm sure we'll talk about that. And so first question I always ask my guest is, what do you love about what you do, Chris?
Oh, that is a great question. When I came out of swimming, I realized that there was a world of possibilities, and I started to explore so many different things that I wanted to do. And nothing was really sticking. I tried a bit of personal training, I tried a little bit of coaching, a bit of teaching. And when I came into coaching in business and speaking on stages, that's when I realized I was ticking the box of what I should have been doing in the first place. And that was helping others. That's the thing I get a kick out of. Some of my clients are now winning awards, and they're big awards because of some of the processes that we've gone through together. And the kick I get from watching somebody else succeed is just as much a high as it was standing on a podium getting a medal for me. Because I'm an outer harmony person, Julian. I like to create harmony wherever I go. So when you get those two side by side, it becomes a no-brainer. But it just took a little while for me to realize.
It's great that you're taking, that almost your learnings and your mindset that created what you got within in the swimming world. But then flipping in that and then trying to help others achieve success and awards and do really well. And it's great that you've found that sense of purpose, because I think there's always a challenge, I think, with any athlete who gets to the sort of pinnacle of their career, certainly in Olympics and golds, medals and things, of what to do next, isn't it? And I think that must be a difficult transition. And how did you sort of manage that and discover that transition? Because I think there can be a bit of a downer for some people, can't they? People get really depressed when it's all over and retired, and where's my identity, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a famous phrase that athletes die twice, and I didn't hear it until I left the sport, but it's absolutely true, or it felt true for me. I knew nothing about a transition. I don't think anybody was talking about it back then, or if they were, it wasn't as public as it is now. And how I got over it, I realized I reached my rock bottom one day. I was walking down Northumberland Street in Newcastle. As you can tell from the accent, I'm from the northeast of England. And I was walking down Northumberland Street, and I just had this horrible pit of the stomach, awful feeling that just kind of took over my body. People might say I was having a panic attack. People might say you were depressed. They can label it all they want. My label was I hit my rock bottom right then. And I remember getting in the car to drive home, and I realized at that point it couldn't get any worse than I was feeling right there and then. And there was like a corner of my heart that was just started to get excited at, well, if I've reached my rock bottom, there's only one way to go now. And I think that is symptomatic of my personality. Even in the darkest times, I'll look for that chink of light. I'll look for that hope, and then start the process of taking that hope onto the next stage. And then the next tactic I employed was just allowing myself to fail. I'd come from an Olympic final. That was my last ever race. And I was trying new things, and they were failing. And what compounded it was people were coming up going, what is it? What is it you do now? With that tone in their voice, I'm a bit confused at what you are now. Who are you? And that compounded it for me. I used to go out with friends, go to parties and go, I must have an answer. And it came from interesting places. And I realized in that moment I was making far too much of it. So I just started to experiment and fail lots. I just failed at loads of things and just thought, oh, okay, I didn't enjoy that. Or I failed at that, but I really enjoyed doing that. I'm going to do it again, but this time I'm going to do it different. And that's where speaking started to happen. I went into a couple of schools, went into a couple of businesses. Before I knew it, people were saying, well, could you come back and do this again? But could you speak to this audience? And then it just became this snowball effect. I originally thought it would last a year, and now I'm 14 years on. I'm still going. And I do pinch myself at some of the comments and the feedback that I get, because I get the chance to go back and work with repeat clients, which is that's my favorite kind of work, because I've got the rapport there. But yeah, that it was a dark time, Julian. I'm not going to lie, it was a dark time of my life, but a one that I am super grateful of now, because I know who I don't want to be.
That's interesting. And I'm sure there's probably people listening right now that maybe having whether it's in their business or in a workplace, they may be an athlete, who knows, that having a dark time of knowing where they're at, or perhaps feels a bit rock bottom. When you got to that place and it felt pretty dark, and you said you knew that was the bottom, although sometimes we don't always feel it's the bottom. We sometimes, is it going to go any further than this, any deeper and darker than this? What did you do? What were the steps that you took that started to get you out of that sort of pit or darkness and start to see some sense of hope?
So the first step was realizing what strategy I was employing that wasn't working. And the strategy I was kind of employing that wasn't working was a find strategy. So you often hear people say like, oh, I'm going to go find a new job. Well, what happens if you're a creative person and finding's not your thing, but creating is? And it was that moment that I sat down and thought, I'm quite a creative person. Yes, I like monogamy. That is my fave. I like defining something and then refining it and just keep that. I love that process. But actually within that, I love to kind of put my own fingerprint on things and just change it up a little bit. So instead of going out and finding that new thing, I started to create it from within. So I sat down and started journaling and writing and working out what is it that was really stopping us. And I realized in the early stages, it was just information. I didn't know what I didn't know. I was in an unknown situation. So that's why I was experimenting. And then I started to go back over the experiments and change them a little bit. So I started to realize that actually I wasn't a type of person to be employed. I'm unmanageable, some might say. And I started to realize that
is that what your coach said to you? Is that what your coach said to you many years? He's unmanageable.
Yeah, he felt a lot of that pain over the years, definitely. But he allowed me to put my fingerprint on things with his guidance, and that's the guidance that I needed. I just needed to create an opportunity, a new one, in a completely different way without getting in the water and getting wet. And then I started my own businesses, and now I own multiple businesses, which are flourishing now, all because I started to acknowledge those questions that I had on the inside, and I stopped answering questions on the outside to other people. And like my granddad used to say years ago, the most important conversation you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. Starting there has to be the very start point. Start with yourself. You've only got two people to impress, the 9-year-old you and the 90-year-old you. That's the only two people you should ever look to impress. And they all involve the word you.
I really like how you flipped the script on the find and went to create, and which puts you in control, doesn't it? Because you're the one who's the creator. And I think we're all here to create something. We've all got the ability to create. Some people, I wouldn't deem myself as what I call creative, but I create. Creating a conversation on podcasts, creating programs. I think we all have that ability to create. And I like that idea, rather than trying to seek something, actually just create it for yourself. And you say you started to do experiments, you started to try things, and elements of courage comes into that, because it's trying something new takes a lot of, well, not just effort, but also your ego, because obviously, as you say, things. So how did you take those steps, thinking, I don't know what I'm doing here, or I'm not so sure? Because it's hard, isn't it? How can, if you were talking to somebody right now who's might be listening, thinking, okay, I want to take those steps, but I just feel it's not going to work. How do we get over that hump of just giving it a go? And even though it may fail, although we don't want it to fail, what did you do? What was your self-talk at that point?
First, I mean, there's loads in this. Firstly, there's that spotlight syndrome, isn't there? That we believe that if we trip up walking down the street, that everybody watched it and everybody saw it and everybody laughed at it. And actually, usually 2 or 3 people saw it because everybody else is too busy with a spotlight on themselves, worried about tripping up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a little bit of that spotlight syndrome we need to get rid of. Is not everybody's counting your failures or mistakes. And if they are, it's because their life is really, really boring and mundane, and yours is really exciting to watch. So that's a win. I think there's also experiments can't fail. They just give you results. By definition, experiments cannot fail. They just give you results. It's what you do with those results which deem whether it's a pass or a fail. So if I get up on stage and I crash and burn, it's a fail if I never get back up again. If I come back down off stage and go, okay, that joke didn't go down very well, but I'm going to do a different one next time, that's just a learning experience. And you place yourself into a win or learn. Now, that does take confidence. It does take throwing caution to the wind. But I think the key here is to recognize, when is your super ego at large? Because the super ego cannot be right. Cannot be wrong, sorry. It's always right. And we've all got an ego. An ego is not a bad thing, actually, what I've learned. A super ego absolutely is. And if you think about a super ego at large, they will not accept feedback. I've been in that position before where I've got, no, I know the right way. And you've got a panel of people going, actually think again, sunshine. So understanding when is the super ego stepping in place, and the super ego will worry about failing. The super ego will worry about taking risks. The ego won't so much. It'll hurt, but it's willing to take a risk. And that's kind of the separation that I created in my own rhetoric, in my own head, like you said, flipping the script, to just asking myself, which voice is talking here? Is it the one that can't be wrong? Because if it is, that's a dangerous route to go down. It's a dangerous route to go down.
Yeah, I look at I don't even say the word sort of failures. I just see it as feedback. It's you try things, experiment, and I think having that sense of every experiment has a result, and it's the wisdom in that result, what you do with the result, how you interpret it, how you move on from that. And I think that's a great sort of way of thinking. And I think it's just seeing it as feedback, and rather than thinking failure, doomed, that's it, I'm never going to do it again. Actually, what did I learn? And I talk a lot about resilience, and resilience for me, it's not just about the grit, determination, but it's about the learning piece. When you get knocked down or sideswiped or whatever it is, what do you learn in that moment, whether it's a team or as an individual? And I think it's important to take those learning loops, and it takes time to reflect and to take moments to do that and to pause. Looking back at your swimming career, very successful. What are your, I suppose, lessons in, I suppose, creating that mindset that unlocks that potential? What were the lessons you learn or strategies that you've brought now into not only your own life but into others that you work with?
So I believe we have to build a process that we believe in, that we can create and cultivate. Yes, it's great permanently borrowing things from other people. I'm constantly on the rob, on the steal, looking at what other people do, going, oh, that's a great idea for a workshop. Oh, that's a great phrase. I like that. But actually, what makes it come alive the most is when I build it into the process and it fits with my philosophies, my morals, my values. When it fits in with that, that's when it really takes off. So my first lesson, I guess, from sport was I needed to then build a process that I believed in, that I could then carve out. And I'm going through that life cycle again in my own businesses. I'm looking at my processes and going, hang on, something's not quite right here. I'm not getting the results I feel I deserve. So I'm going back over my processes, and I'm now way more willing to be wrong. And I'm now more willing to be wrong publicly. You know, I'm willing to hold my hands up and go, do you know what? I dropped the ball. And the interesting part about that is when you start doing that, the people around you trust you even more, because they know that when you come to say, actually, no, this is the route we're going to take, they believe in what you're saying, because it comes from a truthful place, because you're willing to say, I got it wrong. And as well, what I learned from me swimming was that human beings are really, really good at complicating things. We love to convolute things and overcomplicate things and make them into something that they're not. I think assumptions really do kill creativity, and they kill relationships, actually, when you really look at assumptions. So now I go out in search of the evidence, find the facts, even though I'm not like a facts and figures guy. I see where they have their place. I'm more of an emotive person. I make judgments, I make decisions based on my emotions. Really, really helpful, but not in every scenario. So dip into the facts and the figures and really get under the skin of it. And the thing I learned in my swimming career that I've kind of transported into business, which is completely transforming things, is just the power of keeping things simple. You know, why are you in the room? Why are you in the Zoom? Is the question I always ask people. I asked them when they used to come in. I used to go around schools, and I got a reputation for working with some of the hardest of characters in schools, and even worked in prisons and pupil referral units, which were tough places to get into and work. And they're not an easy crowd. And the first thing I would ask the crowd is, why do you think you're in the room? What reason you're in the room? And they would all say, because I'm in trouble. I'm like, not the reason I've come in for you today. I've come in to work with you. And the look on the face is really shocked, because they immediately assume, because they're in that environment, that they're in trouble. And then they look across the room and they go, well, he smashed a window last week, so he's definitely in trouble. And maybe I did something wrong. And the first thing I say to them, look, is, you know, you get to choose why you're in the room, why you're in the Zoom. So why are you in the room? And I'll give them 5 minutes to have a little think about it. Why have you come here? Have you come here because you've been told to? Because that's not an inspired life. Or you're here because there's something that you want to add value to, because now we're talking. Now we're talking. And that level of conversation with yourself can be massively transformational.
And sort of building on that, so I guess that goes a bit of almost people getting to that understanding of their purpose, isn't it? You know, why they do something. You know, why do I do what I do? Why do what you do now? And you discovered that what you're doing of helping people is obviously create your businesses, and you're coaching and mentoring and speaking, but is your ultimate purpose is to help unlock those moments in people. Was there any other lessons in the sense of that keeping it simple? Because I know you have a reference to your 2 lengths, don't you? Because obviously your world was, well, certainly 100 meters was all about 2 lengths. And I remember that there was I think it was a throwaway comment from a sports psychologist said, "Oh, you only do 2 lengths. What's the big deal?" sort of thing, which I think possibly might have bruised you a little bit and sort of belittled what you were doing. But that was the moment that sort of created this simplicity, I guess, for you.
It was, you know, I went through a patch in my career in my swimming where I was massively overcomplicating it. You know, the higher up the chain you go, the more stakeholders are involved, the more people want to know, what's this athlete doing with the funding? Are we going to get a return in medals on the money we've spent? You know, that you feel that as you move up the chain. You know, new levels brings new devils, doesn't it? It doesn't matter what industry you're in. As you move up, it brings new challenges. And I was massively overcomplicating it. And in my head, rightly so, it must be really difficult to get to an Olympic final because not everyone can do it. And that was the synergy. That was the thing that I kind of had side by side, until my sports psychologist, Simon Hartley, who's a good friend of mine, said, maybe we're overcomplicating this here. Maybe you just have to swim 2 lengths of the pool as fast as you can. And, you know, my super ego was like, my job's a bit tougher than that, sunshine. But actually, when I really delved under the hood and we started to explore it, it became a bit of a no-brainer. That was my job. You know, and the question we asked ourselves is what I'm doing here helping me swim 2 lengths? And that's what I help companies do now, is to narrow down You know, what is it? What is it? If you would explain your business to a 5-year-old and hold their attention and make it understandable, what would it be? And you see them going, "Oh, it's a bit tougher than that, Chris. You just don't understand our world." I'm like, okay, I hear what you're saying. So I think listening to understand is a really important part of the journey. Listening to understand, why did you start in the first place? Have you got shiny toy syndrome? Are you all of a sudden going, "Oh, we can make money over there"? Because that's what businesses do really well. We go, "Let's go grab some cash from over there." Instead of kind of staying on mission and staying on point and becoming absolutely world class at what they do, where they can't be caught. And that's what the two lengths started to do for me. It stopped the focus being on, "I'm here to beat him and him," and started to focus on, "It's me against me," laying down my best. And the bit that I didn't vouch for, Julian, that came back in abundance. When I finished my career, I thought I'd failed because I didn't get an Olympic medal. So in the first few years of retiring from swimming, I thought, "I haven't got an Olympic medal, I've failed." And it wasn't until about 3 years into my retirement when I was looking back and I thought, that's the best I could lay down. You know, an Olympic final was the best I could lay down. And I'm really proud of that because I'd asked that question, how can I swim 2 lengths faster? It wasn't, can I swim 2 lengths faster than him or him? It was, how can I swim 2 lengths faster? It's a really inward reflecting question. When you start asking that question in business, that becomes your competitive advantage. That alone becomes your competitive advantage. And I've seen it firsthand now. And I've got evidence now, which is great because I've had some brave businesses go, "Okay, let's lay down some rubber on this track." And they've done it and they've not looked back.
Have you got an example that you could share, whether keep the sort of names anonymous, I don't know, that you've worked with somebody and you've helped them simplify their business and get them to understand what really matters, that they've seen this sort of shift in performance as well?
Absolutely. So I work with a hospitality company and they got their one-liner down to, "We make people happy." You know, what more can you want from that? That's what they do. And all of a sudden people in the business start to understand is that is our job. Whatever role we have in the business, we are there to do that one mission. I work with a kitchen fitting company, a national one, and their one-liner was, "We make boxes fit," which I absolutely love. Because essentially, when it come down to it, that's what they did. They made boxes fit. They're just slightly bigger than the normal ones you get from Amazon. And when you start to look at it, there's so many great spin-offs. One is people now have a bit of direction to go, "Oh yeah, that's what we do." But also they start to understand where they fit into the process and how they can help that. That's a wonderful gift to give back to the team. And then thirdly, whenever it gets really stressful, if you've got a one-liner that you come back to, you go, "Whoa, hang on a second. We're only trying to make boxes fit here," or "We're only trying to swim 2 lengths of the pool here." It sharpens the focus back in the room. Oh yeah, crikey. Because we often do get distracted by the things out there and the things in here. But this ultimately is about asking that question to hold our daily actions to account. A simple, let's get back to why we're in the room, why we're in the Zoom, why we're here. And if you ask that question in business, if you ask it now, Julian, to anyone, how many people have spent an hour or 2 or 3 or 4 on a Zoom call and gone, "That was a waste of time in the last week"? People go, "It's more than 3, Chris. It's about 10. Like, wow. Whose responsibility is that? Is the first question I ask. Who is responsible to that? And they go, "Me." I'm like, "Yep." So let's start that journey.
That's really good, and that focus it was almost like focusing on the purpose, the mission, however you want to term it, really. And you know, I remember working with a company that were overwhelmed with work, with priorities. Everything was a priority, as it always is in an organization. And we listed all these priorities, and then we put their mission above that. And I said, "Which one aligns the mission?" And then they'll go, "Well, that doesn't." So we scrubbed that. Let's move that out of the way. That doesn't. Let's get that one does. Yes, let's do that. And their priority lists got a lot more sharper and focused. You know, I look back at the I think NASA I use this quite a lot. NASA in 1960 had a mission to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. I mean, it's simple, really, isn't it? Everybody knew who worked for NASA or was part of NASA what we're trying to do here. It wasn't very complicated, and I think we do overcomplicate things, and we do make things difficult for ourselves because we feel if it's complicated, it must be really good and sexy and funky, rather than just, I'm part of my local chamber of commerce, and we've just come up with a purpose to help our members thrive. Simple as that. That's what we're about, and everything we do, that's so. You always feel that. Oh, that doesn't feel like enough words. So,
there's a swim coach that I know who's in our network, and I've heard through a friend that his simple one-liner in coaching is he creates space for experiences to be had, memorable experiences, and I love that because in any squad, he could have 40 swimmers. Not everyone's going to make it, but everyone can have memorable experiences. And I love that spin on it, that he can still tick the box for every single swimmer in that group, because it's not just about the top swimmer. Yes, that's great. Their medals are awesome and they can make it the dizzy heights of wherever their talents and their hard work will take them. But also, what about the other swimmers who maybe don't commit that much, but still have some experiences and some memories to create? And when we sit and we really get under the skin of why we're there, often what comes up for a lot of people is they don't know initially, but when they do, they often realize why they're feeling the grind, why they're feeling this is not quite right. And it can be a little bit scary, that, because now they're not talking about what am I getting. Now they're starting to ask questions about who am I becoming. And that's a whole different set of questions that, again, can liberate that magical zest of life. You've got to be brave enough to ask those questions. If you want better answers, ask better questions, eh?
Absolutely. And that's why my podcast is called Helping Organizations Thrive. It just hopefully does what it says on the tin. I have people like yourself who then create this ways of thriving in various ways and guises, but it keeps it quite simple and quite focused in that sense. Just going back to your competitive days of swimming, because I know you're competitive because of what you've achieved. How do we balance that in the context of business, that sort of competitive mindset, which is all about, trying to win awards or get new market share, but also mirroring that with staying mentally healthy and also avoiding sense of burnout? Because obviously, we don't want to burn out as well. So how did you find that in the world of swimming, and how have you done that in the context of business now?
So firstly, I always went with the mindset, and I got tripped up on this, but I always went with the mindset that I asked for this. I remember my coach saying this to me once, but just before I went up to race, and I was nervous and I was worried. And he said, "Oh, look, you don't have to go up if you don't want to." And I was like, "What? What are you on about? You don't have to go if you don't want. You were the one who asked for this." And I was like, "No, this is mine to take." And I quickly switched, because I realized that actually I was the one creating the pain. I was the one creating the story. I think that's crucial. We have control of the story. We've got the pen. We're writing our own chapter. We're in control of our own rhetoric. And that's a really important part when you go into that competition. I think the second part of that is, the most valuable competition you'll ever take part in is the one with yourself from yesterday and the one you create for tomorrow. It's really, really easy to look at leaderboards, isn't it? It's really easy to go, we're third. How do we get second? How do we get first? And actually, really, leaderboards have got nothing really of any substance. They might motivate you a bit, but what's the inspiration? Because motivation and inspiration are two totally different concepts. I worked with a law firm years ago alongside Simon Hartley. The pair of us worked with them, and they were all talking about the league tables in law and in the nation and in the Northeast and being at the top. And we just asked them, what significance does that have to the amount of work that you get in? And they had these really long, convoluted answers, and they spent loads of time climbing up this ladder. But actually, once they started to really question it, they were like, we actually don't know that for real. they stopped doing it and they started to ask themselves questions as to how could they improve their service. So the question they started to ask them really was, how can we serve better? So instead of getting up the league table, they got in front of their clients and just went, look, stab me in the front here. What do I do that's great? What do I do that's not? And they asked their clients and they got gold. They got gold. And then clients then started to refer to others and they forgot about the league table. And before they knew it, they blasted on past that number one spot. But by that point, they didn't care about the league table because their work they were winning had a completely different strategy. And that's this shift. It sounds like a subtle shift, but actually it's a monumental shift from reflecting inwards. The answers to the questions that you've got about how to get better are already around you. They're already around you. They're usually not out there, more in here. So to answer that question, competing with yourself is the key. Competing with you yesterday and utilizing and tapping into the talent you've already got in the room. It's vital.
And how did you manage that when you were, standing ready to dive in for your race, and you're lined up with another 7 competitors, all wanting to get that gold medal, and that sort of pressure point, which it is obviously a pressure point. How did you maintain that, competing yourself and doing the 2 lengths, and it's just about me doing better than I did yesterday? How do you keep that sort of rigor in your mindset there?
I think the first part to realize is pressure is a story. It's not real. It feels real, but it's not real. I remember, again, Simon Hartley, and my granddad used to say this as well years ago. You can't fit pressure in a wheelbarrow in a skip. My granddad used to say in a skip. I think Simon says in a wheelbarrow. You can't fit pressure into it. It's not a real thing. You can't touch it, but you can feel it, and that's the difference. And if we go back to the ancestor of that feeling, it'll be generated from a thought and the story that springs from those thoughts. So if we keep tracking that back, we've got control over those thoughts, or at least we've got control over the impact of those thoughts. That's where we need to start our focus. Walking out to the Olympics, simple things like, there are a few more mums and dads in that audience than a local Northeast swim meet. There's a lot more cameras people behind the cameras. There's billions of people watching. I've got a choice. I can either walk out looking for the differences, or I can walk out building on the similarities. The blocks are the same. I've dove off those blocks 1 million times over around the world and at home. The water temperature is the same. It's usually a very similar 26 to 27 degrees, whatever it is. It's usually typical in any race. The line on the bottom of the pool, the lane ropes, the wall, the length, the distance, all these things are similarities that my brain can walk out and look for. But when you're ill prepared, your brain goes looking for the differences. And that kind of brings up the conversation of, are you worried or are you excited? When we're prepared, when we're ready, when we've focused on our process and we know how to deliver it, our body goes out, our brain goes out, looking for those similarities, building upon them, and it's excited to show the world what it's been doing. And when I think about some of those races that I went up to when I felt ready, they were the ones that I was so excited to just get going. Keeping a lid on that excitement is a skill, same as nerves or anything. But it's about the story that you tell yourself and about how you manage your energy in that moment. That's a very personal thing. Some people like to get up and bounce around and go crazy. You'll slap their muscles and slap their face. I wasn't that guy. I was already up there. I needed to just bring myself down to a certain level, and that took time to learn what I needed in order to perform at my best. And that's what I'm kind of propositioning here is, once you understand how you work, you can then start to build in the process to draw out your performance, your best performance. But essentially, the core of it, this is about getting excited to show the world what you've been working on, not so worried that you start looking for the differences.
Yeah, it's our wonderful bodies or brains has this thing called confirmation bias, which we all know that it looks for evidence, and if you set that evidence for, I don't know, you wake up in the morning and go, oh, it's going to be a rubbish day, You'll go, okay, let's
Yeah.
go and look for the rubbish in the day, and it will find it. As opposed to, I'm going to have a good day. I feel good about today. I'm grateful, all that type of thing. And you set a more positive, and it's similar, isn't it? And I like that idea of looking for the similarities as opposed to the differences, which makes you feel more comfortable, more relaxed in that process. And that's a great thing to think. Somebody who's going to, I don't know, go into negotiation or going to do some speaking or presentation or something quite, and pressure's a story, but something that potentially gives that sense of feeling of pressure, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So in terms of other lessons you've learned in terms of that pressure and in terms of preparation, what was your, because life's not about just the moments of display, isn't it? It's the consistency piece, isn't it? It's the ongoing. And obviously you would have trained, day in, day out, but what would you be doing in your what we call brain training as a regular thing? What were the practices or strategies you did on an ongoing basis?
I learned to fall in love with the process, and I think that's the most important one, actually, if I'm being honest, is because that's where you spend the bulk of your time. If you think about an Olympic swimmer, I was up there for less than 60 seconds race, and 60 seconds worth of maximum effort once every 4 years or 3 times every 4 years if you go heat, semis, and finals. It's not a lot of time considering the time you spend plowing up and down the pool, the time in the gym, 30 hours plus if you add in sports psychology, if you add in physiotherapy, physiology sessions. It was crazy. It was endless. And it was really difficult to work out when you were done for the day, if I'm being honest. And that's a skill that takes time. But for me, it wasn't just about understanding how to fall in love with the process. It was understanding how to get the best out of it and what was it I was there for. So that's where the two lengths really kicked in and hit home for me, because I could ask myself that question: what's going to help me swim 2 lengths faster today? Is it a gym session? Is it a physio session? What is it that I'm feeling? Now that's a really inward reflective question. It's nothing to do with my competitors. And that's where those questions, I got really good with the help of my coach, with the help of my sports psychologist, with the help of friends and family, of asking those questions that maybe others weren't brave enough to ask or answer. And we called it the power of the 3 A's. You ask it, you answer it, and you action it. And I've gone around the houses on this. I've brought it into business. It can't be beaten. If you ask great questions, if you get the answer and action upon it, it's only a matter of time before you start unearthing your true potential, or at least liberating it to sprinkle its magic somewhere. And that, I feel, is crucial.
And I like you've come back to that whole process piece, because I think it's, we get caught up with outcomes, we get caught up with goals, and I think, and I say to a lot of my clients, you've got no control over those, and they always look at me and they think they have, and they haven't really at all. I said, all you've got control of is your now, the process you put in place. If you talk to a Marine, they talk about the meter square. They don't talk about, yes, they know where they're going and all that sort of stuff. That's important, but they talk about the meter square. That's all they can control. What can I do this meter square that I'm walking to and stepping into? And I think it's important to do that, to know that. And that's the most we're in control of, is in the now, in the moment, in the present, not in the future at all. And so, yes, we have goals and things to aim for, but it's the process piece is that. And also, by getting involved in the process, you enjoy the journey a lot more. So you're not so sighted onto the long haul of things and the things in the future. You get in the moment and you enjoy. And I'm sure, you had as much as swimming every day, for me, it feels like a lot to what you did, but you probably start to enjoy that swimming more and actually in the day in the gym and everything else. I've really enjoyed talking to you, Chris, and I really thank you for all your insights. It's been incredible. Some really good sort of gold nuggets. If people are interested to get to know you, connect with you, how's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, so my email address is info@chriscookgb.com, and my website is chriscookgb.com. I'm on Twitter, chriscookgb, LinkedIn. Love using LinkedIn now, so feel free to reach out, drop me a message.
Well, brilliant. Thank you for your time today, Chris.
Oh, thank you, Julian. I've loved this.